Alright, so Unit 18, Day 4, Solving Quadratic Equations Using the Square Root Property. Alright, now the square root property basically says that the square root, or that x squared equals a, then the square root, or like after we take the square root of x, we're left with just an x. And on the other side, we have plus or minus the square root of a, where a is some kind of a number that we can all identify. Now, number 1, okay, it says the square root of 25. Now, the thing is, whenever you take the square root of something, you're not left with just what you see on the calculator, okay? What you actually have is 5 and negative 5 in this case, okay? Because negative 5 squared is going to be 25 as well. Alright? Same thing for number 2 here. We're going to have 7 and negative 7. And the same, of course, for number 3. We'd have 10 and negative 10. Alright? Now, let's look at number 4. Okay? On number 4, it says to solve each equation using the square root property. So we take the square root of both sides. Okay? We're going to be left with plus or minus the square root of 4, which is going to be plus or minus 2. My solutions are going to be 2 and negative 2. Is that easy? Alright? Now, on number 5 here, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that way I can write in these squares a little bit better. Alright, so we got x squared minus 9 equals 0. So I add 9 to both sides. And then I'm left with x squared equals 9. Okay, I take the square root of both sides. Take the square root of both sides. And I'm left with plus or minus 9. The square root of 9. Which leaves me with plus or minus 3. My solutions are going to be 3 and negative 3. And it's just that easy. Okay? Number 6 is going to be much the same thing. Alright? We solve it as far as we can without taking the square root. And then we go ahead and do it. Now, excuse me. Alright, so we've got a division by 2. And what that's going to leave me with is x squared equals 64. I take the square root of both sides of that. So that's going to leave me with plus or minus the square root of 64. Which is going to be plus or minus 8. Okay, so that means I'm going to have 8 and negative 8. Alright. On number 7, we're going to do pretty much the exact same line of thinking here. Alright. First thing that we're going to do is subtract 5 from both sides. That's going to leave me with 14. Alright. Now, when I divide each side by 2, I'm going to be left with x squared equaling 7. Alright, now I'm going to take the square root of both sides to get my x by itself. Now I'm going to have square root of 7 and the negative square root of 7. Alright, now my solutions are going to be square root 7 and negative square root of 7. Right? Now, you might come up with some decimal answers, and that's going to be just fine. I prefer using the radicals, okay? That's what these things are called. Okay? Okay? That is what that thing is called. Alright? Now, number 8. Okay, moving right along here. Okay? As you can see, okay, we've got x minus 4 squared equals 25. So what we need to do is take the square root of both sides of this, And what we're going to be left with is x minus 4 equaling 5 and negative 5. Okay, plus or minus 5. So x minus 4 equals negative 5, and x minus 4 equals positive 5. Alright, so if I add 4 to negative 5, that's going to give me negative 1. If I add 4 to positive 5, I'm going to have 9. And it's just that easy. Okay? So my solutions are negative 1 and 9. There we go. Alright. So on the next one, number 9, okay, we've got x minus 3 squared equals 7. So we take the square root of both sides. X minus 3 is going to be plus or minus the square root of 7. X minus 3 is going to be the square root of 7. X minus 3 is going to be the negative square root of 7. Alright? So basically what's going to happen is we're going to have square root of 7 plus 3. See if I can write that a little bit nicer. And we're going to have negative square root 7 plus 3. Alright? And the reason that I always put this little tail on the end here is, the reason that I put this little tail here is just so I can tell where the end of the square root ends. It's just a habit that I've always been in, so it's a good one to be in. Okay, now my solutions are going to be square root 7 plus 3 and the negative square root of 7 plus 3. And it's just that easy. Alright, so numbers 10 and 11. They're pretty simple. So what we have to do on number 10, we're going to go ahead and take our square root of each of those. So that's going to leave me with y plus or minus the square root of 81. So that's y equals 9 and y equals negative 9. So that's what we write down here, okay? We can just go y equals 9, y equals negative 9. Okay? And there we have it. Alright, number 11. Okay, what we have to do is we have to add 6 to both sides to start out with. That's going to be 2x squared equals 6. Then we divide each side by 2, and x squared equals 3. So we take the square root of both sides, and then we're left with x equals, equals plus or minus the square root of 3, which means x equals the square root of 3 and x equals the negative square root of 3. And there you have it. Alright? Number 12. Number 12 is very simple, okay? So what we're going to have is we're just going to take the square root of each side here. And that's going to be x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 64. Okay, now we all know that the square root of 64 is 8. Okay, so basically this is going to split into two new questions, which is x plus 2 equals 8. That doesn't look like a very good 8. Equals 8. Come on. Let's see if this thing will work for me. Equals 8. Yay, okay. And then x plus 2 equals negative 8. Okay, now I need to subtract 2 from both sides here. And that's going to be x equals 6. I minus 2 from both sides here, though, and I get x equals negative 10. And there I have it. And it's that easy. Alright? Number 13. Numbers 13 and, well, I can't get 14 on there. So, either way. Number 13. I'm going to go ahead and add my 23 to both sides. 23. And that's going to leave me with x minus 6 squared equals 23. I take the square root of both sides, and that's x minus 6 equals the square root of 23. And x minus 6 equals negative square root of 23. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides here. It's going to give me x equals the square root of 23 plus 6. Alright, I add 6 here, and that's x equals the negative square root of 23 plus 6. Okay? Man, this thing does not want to cooperate today. There we go. Okay, there we go. Alright, number 14. Okay, let's see. What do we got to do on this one? Now, the first step should be to subtract 50 from both sides. So I go ahead and I do that. And that's going to give me x plus 6 squared equals negative 50. Alright, now I go to take the square root of both sides. Now, I take the square root of both sides, and the problem here is that this is negative. Alright, and when things are negative, and you try to take the square root, okay, it doesn't work. Okay, so we say no real solution, okay? No real solution, okay? So, whenever you try to take the square root of a negative, it just doesn't work. You have to just call it no real solution, okay? And we will show y'all eventually how to find a solution to this, but for the time being, we're just going to call it no real solution. Alright, now number 15 talks about the area of a rectangle is 25 square meters. And it says to find the length and width if the length, is 1/4 is a quarter times the width. Okay, so how this is going to work is we've got this rectangle. Looks like this. So 1/4 of the width, and then the width. So let's see. We know that 1/4 of W times W equals 25, right? Because that's length times width. Okay, so what that gives me is 1/4 W squared equals 25. Alright, now if I multiply both sides of this by 4 to get rid of that 1/4, that's going to give me W squared equals 100. Alright, which further means whenever I take the square root of this, I'm going to have W equals plus or minus the square root of 100, which equals plus or minus 10. Okay? Now, what we were talking about earlier is that means that W equals 10 and W equals negative 10. Now, which one of those do you think I'm going to use for my length of the width, or my distance of the width, rather? Well, it doesn't make much sense to have a negative length of something. So we're going to call this one a trivial answer. Okay, it doesn't have any real basis. It doesn't make any sense. Right now, our width is going to be okay. So to go back and fill in these little blanks. So, oops. Okay, the area of the rectangle is 25. The width is going to be W, and the length is going to be 1/4 of W. Okay? I know that doesn't look very pretty. Okay, so the equation that we're going to use is going to be W times 1/4 of W. Okay? And then as we were solving this, okay, W squared wound up equaling 100. So W equals 100, or equals 10, or W equals negative 10. Okay? So the width winds up being 10, and then 1/4 of 10 is 2.5. So L equals 2.5. And there we have it. It's that easy, y'all. Okay?